Hi you guys, I'm back with another video. I hope that all of you are great tonight. So, you guys have requested me to check out 10 fighters Dana White never wanted as champions. So, I'm not gonna ramble or anything. Let's get straight into this reaction video. Alright, let's see. How is the volume?
As much as Dana White would love for all of his champions to make him buckets of cash and be super easy to work with, that's just not the reality of the UFC. So today we thought it would be fun to take a look at 10 title holders the promotion's president absolutely could not stand and didn't want as champion. We're not saying they never got along, but these 10 fighters wore divisional crowns and in part or entirely pissed off the boss in doing so. I'm Tommy from MMA On Point, and these are the top 10 fighters Dana White never wanted as champion. Number 10. Fabricio Werdum. When Werdum defeated Fedor Emelianenko at Strikeforce in 2010, he broke one of the all-time greatest winning streaks in MMA history. Dana White had long-running issues with Fedor in their most recent history, a fight with Brock Lesnar that had fallen apart. And when asked about Fabricio's win, White used Werdum's past to drive a stake into his rival.
Everybody's talking about how great this guy is. No, he's not. Then he goes in and loses to Werdum, a guy who we cut from the UFC for losing.
But that loser they cut eventually came back to the UFC after Strikeforce was absorbed by Zuffa and found himself on a 5-fight win streak with an interim heavyweight title for his troubles. His next opponent would be the man Cain Velasquez, the two-time UFC champion who was on a 4-fight run of his own with 2 epic beatdowns of Junior Dos Santos, and after a long layoff due to injury, the promotion was looking to make a huge push in the Mexican market, utilizing the champion's heritage in their second ever show in Mexico City. Unfortunately for Dana White, the UFC reject ruined all that when he took it to Cardio Cain at increased elevation and stole his title in the 3rd round. The UFC has not held a pay-per-view in Mexico since. Number 9. George St-Pierre. You either die a hero or you live long enough to piss Dana off. GSP was certainly good business for the UFC during his reign as welterweight champion, and during those times, St-Pierre and DFW got along just fine. But following his controversial victory over Johnny Hendricks at UFC 167, George announced he was planning on taking some time away, and just like that, there was trouble. White was fuming about the judge's decision post-fight.
I'm blown away that George St-Pierre won that fight. Does anybody here think that Johnny Hendricks didn't win the fight?
More so than the decision, the UFC president was having none of the champion's desire to take a break.
You owe it to the fans, you owe it to that belt, you owe it to this company, and you owe it to Johnny Hendricks to give him that opportunity to fight again.
White would later, while not revealing them, dismiss GSP's reasons for needing time away.
You know, he's very emotional about some shit that's going on with him right now, and it's really not that bad.
A month later, George vacated his title and left this giant disaster behind him for a few years. He would return in 2017, moving up to middleweight to take the title from Michael Bisping at UFC 217. One of the stipulations of getting that fight was that GSP would have to defend against Robert Whittaker if he won. George vacated again, having fought Bisping with a digestive disease. White was not surprised.
There's a reason I put that stuff in the contract for him to sign. There's a reason. Am I shocked? You know, I don't think anybody's shocked.
Talk started heating up in 2018 about a second return and a lightweight title fight against Khabib Nurmagomedov. But after St-Pierre's official retirement that next year, he revealed the UFC ultimately shot down the idea of the fight for fear that GSP would again vacate the title should he win. This is all very recent, so literally right now, White doesn't want George as a champion. Number 8. Tim Sylvia. Widely considered to reign over one of the weakest heavyweight divisions in the history of the promotion, Tim Sylvia wasn't exactly breaking pay-per-view records by the time he matched up with a recently unretired 43-year-old Randy Couture at UFC 68. To give you some perspective on White's position, Sylvia didn't even headline in his previous title defense despite being a champion in the heaviest weight. This had only happened 2 other times since Dana took over the promotion, and one of those times was again with Sylvia at UFC 44. In a classic moment, the underdog Couture absolutely dominated Sylvia all fight, and as per White, saved the heavyweight division. Things got worse though. By that next year, Tim wanted a shot at Brock Lesnar and wanted Brock Lesnar pay. When Dana said no, he asked out of his contract and was granted his release, something that almost never happens in the UFC, further demonstrating how little they valued their former champion. After being stopped by Fedor in 36 seconds at Affliction Banned later that year, White told Yahoo Sports, "We all have to thank him for getting rid of Tim Sylvia. He's been stinking up the joint the last couple years, and Fedor did everyone a favor by beating him so easily and getting rid of him." In 2012, Sean Shelby had put into motion an attempt to re-sign Tim in the newly acquired Strikeforce, but White vetoed the return, saying nobody cares about Tim Sylvia. Number 7. Germaine de Randamie. Dana White was pretty sour after UFC 208.
What was the highlight for you?
Plane ride home.
The whole show was a bit of a dud, and not only did the main event not deliver, it ended in controversy after Germaine de Randamie hit Holly Holm twice after the horn and was deducted no points. The foul should have warranted a draw in this inaugural featherweight title fight, which, according to Dana, would have been
the only possible way this night could be
White rarely matchmakes post-fight, or at least doesn't like to, but on this night there was no doubt who was next: Cris Cyborg, the woman they built the division for in the first place. GDR had a rough start to her title run, but a big fight with one of the best of all time could certainly put her back in everyone's good graces. A week after de Randamie won the title, Cyborg was cleared of any wrongdoing for a potential USADA doping violation, and with that final hurdle out of the way, the bout was tentatively scheduled for UFC 214 in June. But that May, the Iron Lady released a statement through her management that she refused to fight Cyborg due to her past with PEDs. This went over about as well as new coke, at least at the time. We'll get back to that later. The backlash from fans and media was constant, and a few weeks later, Dana White had had enough. De Randamie was stripped of her title, ending her 128-day reign. In an official statement, the UFC said champions are expected to accept fights against the top contenders in their respective weight classes in order to maintain the integrity of the sport. Number 6, Nicco Montano. It's pretty incredible for a fighter to go from their UFC debut to Dana White being completely done with them in less than a year's time, but here's Nicco Montano. After winning TUF 26 to become the inaugural flyweight champion, Montano simply had nothing but trouble. Her first title defense was meant to be against super popular axe-murdering Kyrgyzstani Valentina Shevchenko, who had recently moved to flyweight and brutalized Priscilla Keshweda, but a surgery would leave the champion sidelined. Ariel Helwani would report that the UFC was getting tired of waiting on Nicco and were looking to have her fight the Bullet in July, but Montano was not going to be ready until October, so she was scheduled for a fight in September, and as a result was way past weight going into fight week, eventually being hospitalized during her cut. 10 months after her debut and being crowned champion, White made this announcement.
Yeah, she didn't make weight. I mean, that's pretty much it. The title is vacated, so it's a vacant title right now.
Montano would take to social media to point out how many champions have gone longer without being stripped, but White saw a star in Shevchenko, and they weren't going to wait any longer. Valentina won the vacant title that December, a year after Nicco's debut. Number 5, Colby Covington. At first, it would have seemed that Colby Covington was exactly the type of champion Dana White would want. He was brash and in your face. He caused all kinds of chaos on the microphone, but a clash with the boss would nearly clip his wings before he ever flew. The trouble started after he captured interim gold against Rafael dos Anjos. Dana White wanted him to fight rival Tyron Woodley 3 months later at UFC 228, but Covington had planned a surgery to correct a sinus issue and rejected the offer. After the fight failed to materialize several more times, White wanted Colby to fight Kamaru Usman, but Covington wasn't in the contender business anymore and rejected the fight. So Dana gave Usman the title shot against Woodley instead at UFC 235 and stripped Colby, who went on a media tour bashing White and the UFC.
Everybody knows I ain't got nothing to say to Uncle Fester.
Next, Colby invaded 235's fight week, harassing Usman with a bullhorn and in a now infamous video, confronting Dana at a blackjack table before waiting outside the casino next to White's car. The UFC president wasn't too impressed.
I offered you the fight. You know I offered you the fight. You could have took it. Now you're gonna have to wait.
400+ days after winning the interim title, Covington would try to get back in the UFC's good graces by taking a short-notice fight with Robbie Lawler while champion Usman was out with an injury. After dominating the fight, there was no doubt he was next in line, and a title bout was scheduled for December, which he would go on to lose. After all that, you'd have to wonder how Dana felt about Covington, and this response when asked to comment on Colby telling the media he would hit White in the head with the title if he tried to put it around his waist says it all.
Good luck with that.
Exactly. Good luck.
He's a big mouth fucking idiot.
Number 4, Amanda Nunes. When Dana White gave a tour of his offices at the new UFC HQ, a huge image of Amanda Nunes featured prominently on one of the walls. And while the two are now thick as thieves, with White appreciating her accomplishments as the greatest female fighter ever, things were not always that way. Amanda Nunes played the ultimate spoiler. Ronda Rousey was a promotional cash cow, and a rematch to regain her title from Holly Holm would break records. That was until Holm decided she wanted to fight Miesha Tate while waiting for Rousey, a decision White was not happy about because the worst possible outcome came true when Tate pulled out a final round Hail Mary choke to win the fight. So they lost the huge rematch, but at least Tate was Ronda's most bitter rival. Her return would still be huge. Tate was given a fight to bolster her title reign at UFC 200 against measly number 4 Amanda Nunes. Oops, Nunes decimated Miesha. Now all the UFC had was Ronda's coming back. And damn did they push that. Amanda was barely featured in any of the promotion leading up to the fight. It's a wonder she was even on the poster. There was no doubt who Dana and company wanted to win this one. So long as Rousey performed, Ronda Mania would be running wild again in no time. Instead, Nunes beat Rousey worse than Holly did, forcing the Golden Goose to retire. Sometimes these things happen in MMA. Number 3. Demetrious Johnson. A few years into the UFC flyweight division's existence, there were two things that were apparent. Demetrious Johnson was the best 125er in the world, and nobody cared about flyweight fights. Despite being literally the most successful UFC champion of all time, Johnson and the division were simply not drawing in the numbers the promotion was looking for. And for years, according to White, there was consideration for dropping the division entirely. Frankly, there still is that consideration, but the glue that everyone felt was keeping the division together at the time was DJ. He was too good to get rid of, right? In the lead up to his record-setting 11th title defense, Johnson got caught up publicly with UFC brass about a potential fight with TJ Dillashaw. Demetrious wrote an open letter laying out all of his issues with the TJ fight and his treatment by the promotion over the years. White responded by pointing out Johnson's poor pay-per-view numbers and questioned his position as the pound-for-pound number one in the world. Ultimately, DJ would fight and defeat Ray Borg, afterwards saying he was open to a super fight for a few million. Dana wasn't a fan of the idea.
Listen, you can't be in a position where you're like, I want $2 million, fuck you, I don't care what you make.
Seemingly untouchable while still winning, Johnson's loss to Henry Cejudo at UFC 227 was the final nail in the coffin. Rather than cut one of the best fighters in history still in his prime, DFW opted to trade him to one championship for Ben Askren. Number 2. Cris Cyborg. Holy shit, where to start with this one? How about 2012 when Cyborg popped for steroids and was stripped of the Strikeforce title? A few months later, Ronda Rousey would make her bantamweight debut in the promotion, many fans believing she did so to avoid a bout with Cris. From here, their paths diverge. Cyborg was sent to Invicta, and Rousey became the biggest star in the UFC. But the calls for a Cyborg-Rousey fight never went away. The response was always the same by Dana and Ronda, though. Make 135 and we'll do it. Along the way, both took shots at Cyborg's appearance, Rousey calling Cris an it in a Yahoo interview, and Dana, when asked about Ronda's comments, giving this infamous reply.
When I saw her at the MMA Awards, she looked like Vanderlei Silva in a dress and heels.
For years, it was the same line. White would make the fight today if Cyborg could make 135. Many fans felt like the UFC was simply protecting Ronda, but things started coming together in 2015 when Cris signed with the UFC. Immediately, they ran into some trouble. Cyborg was basically dying making catchweight 140, and Ronda lost her title. A shift towards a featherweight division specifically for Cyborg finally lightened things up between White and his new 145-pound champion, but they would sour again once Amanda Nunes shocked the world and KO'd Cyborg in less than a minute at UFC 232. One fight later, a victory over Felicia Spencer, Chris's contract was up. Post-fight, Cyborg was calling for a new contract and a rematch with Nunes, a fight Dana said Cris didn't actually want. This is when things went off the rails. Cyborg posted a doctored video of White backstage on her YouTube channel where it appeared as if he was saying he was lying about her, and that was really the last straw. After years of contention, Dana released a video explaining his side of their long, complex history, and it hilariously citing GDR's fears about Cyborg's PED use, and then ended their relationship with this simple phrase:
We're out of the Cyborg business.
Cris went on to Bellator and is their current featherweight champion. It's probably safe to say this one is over for good. Number 1. Tyron Woodley. White and Woodley have a long vocal history, and while they've at times made buddy-buddy, it's mostly been beef. The UFC president has been regularly critical of the former welterweight champion throughout his career, and Tyron's been more than happy to fire back. Before he even held the title, White wasn't a fan of Woodley's safe style.
Tyron's got a ways to go. Seems like he chokes in the big fights.
After he shockingly KO'd Robbie Lawler to capture the strap at UFC 201, things didn't improve. Frustrated with how he was being marketed in the lead-up to UFC 205, Woodley famously told ESPN that he was the worst treated champion in UFC history, and in part attributed this to his race, which prompted Dana to call him a drama queen who drove away fans. The beef between the two didn't get any better after his rematch with Stephen Thompson shit the bed, and soured further after another boring defense against Damian Maia.
When you get booed out of an arena, it means people don't want to watch you fight, you know?
Woodley fired back at White, saying if he didn't get treated better, he'd start spilling UFC dirt. A long layoff due to injury would end with Tyron mopping the floor with Darren Till, a fighter the UFC was priming to be a big star. Much was made of White's expression prior to giving the champion his belt, and he was absent from the post-fight press conference. Then there was the failed Nate Diaz fight beef. White accused Woodley of holding up the division with minor injuries, several times denying a fight with Colby Covington. On and on. There's almost too much to mention. They were seemingly never on the same page, and now that Woodley has dropped the strap to Usman, it'll be interesting to see what it's going to take for him to earn a shot, given Dana and Tyron's history. Thanks for watching. Please give us a like.
That was the video, you guys. It was interesting. It was some new faces that I've never seen before, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. Like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Comment also other videos you want me to react to. Yeah, bye.